Okay, home stretch, folks. This is the fifth and final video of the Master the Grant Lifecycle from Prospect to Execution series focused on grant execution. And as a reminder, this is made possible through the generous support of the Water Foundation and Urban Waters Learning Network. So this video breaks down the key steps to help you manage grants with less stress and more efficiency. We'll follow those 4 steps of this phase from the grant management process with a focus on practical guidance, checklists, tools, so that you can take these learnings and apply them directly in your organizations. And just a note, by now, the core concepts of this training should be kind of coming into focus and bringing the full picture together. So I hope you're starting to see how everything kind of connects, and certainly think things will crystallize more as we move through this final stage of the process. So let's get started. So you get the news that your proposal was accepted. After all the high fives, the first step is to review and sign the grant agreement. And this step is very often overlooked, kind of treated as a formality, but taking the time to fully understand the grant agreement before signing is really important. It's very informative to how your organization will manage the funding. The grant agreement lays out typically important guidelines, restrictions, terms that will really shape your grant's implementation. So do this step properly. You'll prevent making mistakes that could strain your good standing with your funder or even jeopardize the work, the grant itself. So key steps are to first assign ownership. So make sure somebody is responsible and leading this process. I would recommend the grant lead, since their role includes understanding and translating funder requirements. However, in some organizations, finance or some other staff member often takes this role, and that's fine. Second is to review the agreement thoroughly. So read every clause. If something's unclear, flag it, escalate it internally, and figure out what to do with that information and resolving that lack of clarity. Third is to clarify terms with the funder. So if a clause is still vague, request clarification and get that in writing. If a requirement is unrealistic, engage with the funder to explore flexibility. In my experience, funders are often really open to and expect to respond to their grantees' needs and requests for adjustments. And those conversations I have found can really lay the groundwork for stronger, more open, collaborative working dynamics with funders. And finally is to finalize and store. So once you're confident in the terms, sign and store the countersigned grant agreement in a grant folder. And just a note, as an outcome of this process, the grant lead or another team member should be documenting and clocking key clauses that will need to be communicated out to the team, because folks will be responsible for compliance to that particular term, or items that will need planning or systems or other solutions to set the organization up so that it's compliant. And you'll see how that plays out in these next steps. So now that your grant is official, it's time to set up your grant. A new grant kicks off a series of tasks across the organization, across multiple teams. And what I have here is not a comprehensive list, and surely your organization has its own. But this is a solid starting point. And as with all the tools and learnings from this series, just take these in and glean what, steps look new or information looks new here that may be useful to add to or to implement at your organization. So the first is administrative tasks. So, that includes creating a grant name, and that would likely follow a standard naming convention you have at your organization to keep grants straight and consistent across finance programs and fundraising. You'll also want to create a folder for this grant and store final grant docs in it. PDFs are your friend here. We talked about these documents being ongoing resources, and protecting them from accidental editing can be a really helpful step to make. And finally, you'll want to enter report deadlines into your organization's calendaring system or into that master grant calendar template I provided in an earlier video. On the finance side, a new grant triggers a number of steps. First, entering the grant into your accounting system. So You're set up to spend, set up to track expenses, and generate reports, whether that be for internal tracking and making sure you're catching off-track spending early or externally for funder reports. And second is logging the payment schedule and any conditions or triggers you need to be mindful of for fund disbursement. On the funder stewardship side, it's at this point that you really want to map out your funder engagement strategy. So beyond the required check-ins that your funder may lay out, what are some other strategic touch points you want to have throughout the life of the grant? And if you're not sure what your funder prefers, ask them. I think proactive communication can really pave the way for a warm relationship that makes those tough conversations you often have to have easier, and any conversation about renewal funding much easier as well. And finally is the project management component. So you want to integrate this grant into your program team's workflow by logging, key deliverables into a project tracker, whatever system they might have, to kind of track and manage programmatic work. And that really allows you to, similar to the finance piece, see progress and catch activities that are off course early on. So here's a step that should look familiar now that we've set up the grant. As with the proposal, it's time to launch it. I can't tell you how many times someone from an organization I've worked with has said, it's a renewal grant. We thought we didn't need the launch, but we did it and it was so helpful. So don't skip this. A quick meeting, often 30 minutes with your grant team, can make such a difference in making sure everyone's aligned and ready for a smooth grant lifecycle. And this should be led by the grant lead and really be a place where roles are established, key information is communicated out, reminding the team what the grant is about and what's been committed to, and a discussion on myriad topics, really important to get everyone squared away on before you can get rolling. And you can see with that icon there, we have a tool to help this step, and that's if you scroll down to the notes below this video, you'll see a link to a grant launch meeting agenda, and there you'll see a place to input the names of those grant team roles and also some of those myriad topics that I mentioned. So I want to take a moment to talk about grants management. This is not part of the grants management process flow for a few reasons, primary among them that this is not a discrete process. It's truly the ongoing day-to-day work that just permeates your organization. So I won't go through these point by point, but just want to highlight how the steps, the tools, the strategies we've shared with you should really set you up well to handle the day-to-day work of managing a grant. And now we're at the final step of this phase and of the grant management process, which is grant close. This is a chance to wrap things up smoothly. And while the title may suggest it's a final step, many activities actually start weeks or even months before the grant period ends. So keep that in mind as you look at this list here. So with that, a grant closeout checklist may look something like this. Spending down funds. So you want to ensure all grant funds are fully spent down. Completing all commitments. So make sure that all the activities, deliverables, monitoring and evaluation, and other requirements are fulfilled. You're going to want to compile and submit your final report to your funder. Make sure your grant folder contains final reporting and all other documents for this grant. So they're in a shared folder, easy to access and reference for the future. You'll close this out in accounting. You'll want to wrap up the financials in the system, close out the grant and other steps that are led by finance at this stage. Your organization may have a practice or may want to consider doing internal debriefs where you're discussing lesson learned and next steps, either for this body of work or for your relationship with that funder. You'll want to do funder follow-up. So express gratitude to your funder. Share and remind them of all of that information in those reports. What did you accomplish together? And talk about renewal funding and what the future of your partnership can look like. And finally, celebrate. So recognize your team's hard work. As I said in the proposal stage, this is really hard work. So whether it's shout outs or cupcakes in the kitchen or a virtual happy hour, make space to really celebrate and connect with your colleagues. So that concludes this webinar series. Thank you so much for attending and for the care and attention you're putting into improving your organization's grant management practices. You know, it's a passion of mine because I've seen the positive impact it can have on people and teams and fundraising success, which is ultimately, you know, the impact that we seek to have for the people and communities that we serve. So just wishing the best of luck as you take these learnings and implement them at your organization. And just a final note, if you have any feedback you'd like to share, please follow that link you see below. Thanks for joining.